Hi guys, welcome back. We left off near the bottom of page 13. We're still in chapter 1. These chapters are longer, you'll notice. Holes had very short chapters, but these are longer. So we left off learning about Jane. She's on a ship with her companion Mary. She's 16, she's puking, she's been on this ship for 5 months. And we're trying to understand how she got there. And we flash back to see that she was the happiest girl until she hit Sally Biddle with an apple, and then Sally Biddle started to tell her really mean things, and that's where we left off. Sally Biddle was relentless. On an exceptionally mild February afternoon in the year 1850, I was sitting on the front step of our house on Walnut Street eating a piece of Mrs. Parker's cherry pie. Suddenly, Sally Biddle appeared, like a mosquito scenting a plump bare leg. Cora Fletcher was with her. Cora was almost a perfect replica of Sally, right down to her rabbit fur muff. Everyone knows that all the best people live on Arch Street, Sally Biddle remarked to Cora, as if I weren't sitting right there. I paused, fork to my lips. Take this house, for instance, she said. Why, it looks older than our stables. Sally Biddle's eyes slid up and down our house with barely concealed contempt. I looked at our house as if for the first time. How small and shabby it appeared. The front door needed painting, and the shutter near my bedroom window was nearly falling off from the time I had tried to climb down it. And why, our house was only 2 stories, instead of 3 stories like the houses on either side. How had I never noticed these things before? The pie in my mouth abruptly tasted sour. Sally Biddle's eyes shined at the expression on my face. It seemed in that moment that my entire life was a sham. I was a disgrace to Papa, I had killed my own mother, and our house was poor? I felt tears well up in my eyes. I declare I have never seen so fine a house in all of Philadelphia, a voice broke in. Standing next to our gate, the buttery late afternoon sun lighting his pale blonde hair like a halo, was a young man holding a leather satchel. A satchel would be like a man purse, basically. Sally Biddle gaped at him. And gaping would be like, Cora Fletcher gaped at him. I gaped at him. With his beautiful gray eyes and chiseled chin, he was hard not to gape at. I'm William Balt, my hero said, tipping his hat. And that's a nice piece of pie you have there. So that was kind of the introduction to this new character. Was there ever a young man such as William Balt? How to describe his perfection? His gray eyes, deep and wise, his lovely eyelashes, thick as a girl's, and his hair golden and smooth like spun wheat. Then there was his elegant nose, straight as a rail. Not to mention, he had all of his teeth, front and back. And did I remark upon his ears, the perfect shape of each pink lobe? Do you think that Jane might have a little crush on William Balt? I think so. William had come to live with us, an apprentice to my father. So remember, her father's a surgeon. And at that time, if you wanted to go into a skilled trade, you had to apprentice. Remember in Fever, Nathaniel apprenticed the painter. So William is apprenticing her father. So he will live in their house and be trained. He stayed in the spare bedroom at the back of the house and took supper with us each evening. There had been other young men who had apprenticed to my father in the past, but never one so handsome or fine, or with such a charming charming chin. She's pretty fascinated by this guy's chin. A promising young man, William, Papa said in an approving voice, 19 and already finished medical school. So we know Jane is like 11, maybe turning 12, and William is 19. So he is older than her. What else can I tell you about him? He was the youngest son of a large family and a proper gentleman. He always scraped his shoes before coming into the house, and he had beautiful manners. Why, he never belched at the table or spit tobacco like the men in the taverns. And he was kind, so very kind to me, that it was like a balm after all the terrible months of Sally Biddle. Balm is B-A-L-M. Balm would be like a lotion or a cream that you would rub on that kind of makes something feel better, like if you get a sunburn and you put on some aloe vera. So he's soothing her after all of the meanness that she's been getting from Sally Biddle. Everything seemed manageable when William was present. One morning, when I was sitting on our front step, William came out of the house. "What excitement are you up to today, Miss Peck?" he asked. I shrugged. Most likely I would be spitting from the roof at passing gentlemen with Jebediah Parker, but I thought it best not to say anything. A man who didn't belch at the table was unlikely to approve of spitting. A lady and gentleman came walking by. The lady looked at my stained apron and tangled hair and shook her head, pursing her lips. William looked away, reddening. So what does that mean if William looks away and he gets kind of red? So he was a little embarrassed for Jane that this lady was noticing how she looked. When they were out of sight, William gave me a measured look. Is that young lady still being unkind to you? He asked. You mean Sally Biddle? Jane, he said in a firm voice. Perhaps if you were more, how do I say this? If you were more ladylike, they would not be so terrible to you. I looked at him in surprise. I know it's been hard because you have no mother, but you must learn how to be a proper young lady, Jane, he said, gazing at my stained apron. One's position in society is very important. But how do I learn? My mind was whirling. You could learn such a thing? To be a proper young lady? This would solve all my troubles forever. My hero scratched his head. Surely there must be a girls' school around here. I considered this for a moment. But if I go to school, who will help Papa with his patients? A girl like you ought not to be following her father when he's treating patients. It is most improper, he said sternly. But you are too big to sit on a man's belly, I insisted. Why ever would I sit on a man's belly? Papa says men behave better when he sets broken bones if I sit on their bellies, and that they think twice about getting into another bar brawl, I explained. William looked very much like he wanted to laugh, but didn't. Instead, he said, Jane, I have 2 younger sisters, and they both went to school and turned out very well. I know you could be a perfect young lady if you would just try. You do? I asked, hope beating in my stomach. Yes, Jane, he said, his beautiful gray eyes looking deep into mine. How long his lashes were. I do. The very next morning, I arose early from anticipation. I selected a fresh apron, if not free of stains, at least as clean as Mrs. Parker could get it with boiling. I did my best to pull a brush through my hair and tie it in a braid. Then, walking a safe distance behind, I followed Sally Biddle and the other girls as they made their way down Arch Street to a tidy-looking brick house. They disappeared behind a green door with a shiny brass knocker. A discreet sign hanging from the side of the door announced the name of the establishment, Miss Hepplewhite's Young Ladies' Academy. I nearly lost my nerve when I saw that sign, but then I remembered William's encouraging words. I took a deep breath and walked up and knocked on the brass knocker. The second echoed in my ears like a taunt, and my heart thumped fast. A young, hurried-looking maid answered the door. Yes, she asked. I'm here to see Miss Hepplewhite, I said in a nervous rush. Do you have an appointment? No, I whispered. She looked me over and sniffed as if to say she was hardly surprised that a girl like me didn't have an appointment. She held out her hand. Your card, please. Card? Your calling card. You do have one, don't you? No, I said, feeling as if I'd failed some important test. I didn't even know what I was supposed to have a calling card. The maid shook her head at me in a disappointed way. What's your name? Jane Peck. She disappeared back inside the door and reappeared a moment later. Follow me, Miss Peck. So back at that time, because you couldn't call someone, the only way would be to write a letter, or if you went to someone's house, you had a card. It would be like a business card, and it was called your calling card. I think we talked about this when we looked at fever, and your name would be on there. So then you would leave your calling card there if the person wasn't at their house, so then they knew that you had been there to see them. I followed the maid down a long, cool, shadowed hallway to a closed door. She told me to sit on a chair. Miss Hepplewhite would be with me shortly. A moment later, a smooth voice called, Come in. I opened the door nervously. A trim-looking older woman wearing a gray silk dress was seated behind a desk, her dark brown hair bundled discreetly in a snood. A snood would be up, like in a bun. Her hands clasped in front of her, all efficiency. She looked as neat as a calico print. Calico is a print that has, like, tiny flowers. Yes, she asked, a frown wrinkling her forehead. Are you Miss Hepplewhite? I am. How may I help you? I swallowed hard. I'm Jane Peck, and I'd like to go to your school. As an afterthought, I whispered, Please? Miss Hepplewhite sized me up where I stood as if I were a ham she was deciding whether or not to purchase. How old are you? She asked finally. 11. I'll be 12 next month, I whispered. Miss Hepplewhite shook her head. It is my opinion that a girl should begin her education at a young age, 9 at the very latest. You are too old. Surely your mother knows this? She said in a disapproving voice. But I don't have a mother, I cried. Miss Hepplewhite went still, her face softening slightly. Yes, of course. You are Dr. Peck's daughter, are you not? I nodded. I don't think, she began. Please, I pleaded. I have to be a proper young lady. Otherwise, my father will never marry, and it will be all my fault because I'm a disgrace. She studied me. Have you had any education at all? I can read and write. I went to common school until I was 10. Miss Hepplewhite hesitated. Very well. I shall take you on as a special pupil. She paused, fixing me with a serious look. But you must promise to work very hard. I nodded furiously. I would promise anything. It's settled then. I'll expect you here tomorrow, promptly at 8 o'clock. Please have your father call on me to discuss the fees. Then she looked down at her writing, dismissing me. I started toward the door. Miss Hepplewhite paused, pen in hand, and looked up at me. One other thing, Miss Peck? Yes, ma'am. A clean apron tomorrow, Miss Peck. No jam stains, understood? It's cherry pie, Miss Hepplewhite, I said. She blinked. No cherry pie stains then, Miss Peck? Yes, ma'am, no cherry pie. I didn't mind if it meant foregoing cherry pie forever. After all, I would be attending Miss Hepplewhite's Young Ladies Academy. So you can see she's already changing. Instead of being who she was in the beginning, where she was super happy, wonderful relationship with her father, and she thought everything was great, she let outside people get in her mind and let them decide what's best for her. Sally Biddle saying, you're an embarrassment. William pretty much saying, you need to be a proper young lady. You need to be this way. And now that's what she's decided. So she's not really listening to what her father has always been like, hey, think your mind, speak your mind and think and be who you are. Now it's, what does Sally Biddle and William think? Okay, so chapter 2, or listening well. So each chapter is going to be a chapter from the book at Miss Hepplewhite's. So if you were a girl in the 1850s, you would go to girls' school and you wouldn't be learning academic type of things like science and history and mathematics. You would be learning listening well. So you're going to be very interested in the subjects that these girls study. Let's just say they're not expected to think too hard. All right, so listening well. Miss Hepplewhite's was a whole new world. There was so much of importance to learn. We studied, here are the subjects, etiquette. Etiquette is like manners. Like proper etiquette when you're eating is to put your napkin in your lap. If you receive a gift, it's proper etiquette to write a thank you note. It's proper etiquette to RSVP if you've received an invitation. Like all of that is etiquette. It's just like proper manners, the proper things to do. So that's one of their subjects, etiquette. Embroidery. Embroidery is sewing designs. If you've ever been on a sports team, a lot of times you'll have the name will be embroidered. So it's kind of like sewing, making, writing or names. So it's like sewing with a needle. Watercolors, drawing, and music. That's their subjects. Didn't hear science, you didn't hear math. The older girls also studied French conversation. And if you remember in Fever, remember the Ogilvy sisters were learning French conversation. So if you had money at that time, you were expected to speak at least 2 languages. English, obviously, and French was very common because if you were rich, it was most likely that you would be sent back to Europe to travel in France. That would be something that a family with money would do. The older girls also studied French conversation, which Miss Hepplewhite said was crucial to a young lady's education. So I guess I'm not very educated because I can't speak French. I had never heard anyone speak French except the baker, who would curse in it when a stray dog stole his bread, but all the girls seemed to agree with Miss Hepplewhite on this matter. There were 12 students. So just imagine that, just 12 kids in your class, and they're all girls. And Miss Hepplewhite gave us lessons in the parlor room. The older girls sat in the back, but I sat in the front with the 9 and 10-year-olds, even though I was 11. So that would be embarrassing. If there were 12 students in your class that were all different ages, and the older kids sat in the back and the younger kids sat in the front, say I put you guys in the front, one of you in the front with the 3rd graders, 2nd and 3rd graders, it would be kind of embarrassing while all of the 5th and 6th graders are sitting in the back behind you. That would be really hard. And now picture way at the back is Sally Biddle and Cora Fletcher and all of her lovely friends. So it's got to be really uncomfortable for Jane. Sally Biddle, who was 13, said in the very back, "Sometimes I felt her eyes pressing into the back of my head, hot as embers, as if she were just waiting to burn me." Miss Hepwhite gave me a book called The Young Lady's Confidant. Confidant is like your companion, someone that you confide in, so that's what the book's called. "Consider this your Bible, Miss Peck. Refer to it often," she urged, holding the small brown-covered book as if it were a great treasure. I turned the pages carefully. "Please turn to chapter 5, or Listening Well," Miss Hepplewhite instructed the class. I had already missed the first 4 chapters as I had joined late in the term. She walked slowly in front of the room, her feet barely making a sound, her dove-gray petticoat swishing back and forth, soothing as a swing. The pocket watch hanging from her waist by a chain swayed slightly in time with her movements. "A young lady should always listen well. No matter whether you are at church, on the street, or in your very own parlor, it is most important to listen carefully and quietly." Miss Hepplewhite paused for emphasis. "If you listen well," hey, the cat just jumped, sorry. "If you listen well, you shall always do well," she predicted. Miss Hepplewhite suggested that we practice listening well as our study assignment. When someone said something clever, we were to laugh at the appropriate moment, or perhaps nod if the subject turned grave. That evening, so her homework is to just listen and have the right reaction. It's great to be a good listener. It's also good to know how to communicate back, but she's being told to just be quiet, listen, and make the right faces when it's, whatever the person's saying. That evening, supper was very quiet as I was so busy listening well. Papa and William were discussing a case Papa was concerned about, an old banker whose toes looked rotten. "I expect we'll have to take the foot off," Papa said with a sigh. William disagreed. "The recommended therapy is to bleed the patient first." "Bloodletting has taken more lives than any war," Papa scoffed. "The man's going to lose enough blood when I remove the foot. I won't have him lose any more because of quackery." Papa was something of a radical in his profession. "That is your opinion, of course," William said stiffly. So you can already see the dynamic between William and Papa is they're very different. Papa's like, speak your mind, be yourself, to Janie. William's like, no, you need to be a proper young lady. Well, this man's toes have gone rotten. Papa's opinion is, you got to chop off the foot. William's opinion is, let's, bloodlet, like we talked about in fever, but releasing blood in your arm, how is that going to make your toes not be dead anymore? So they have very different opinions in medicine as well. I much wanted to announce that I once saw Papa lop off the rotten toes of a man who had a brick dropped on them, but I forced myself to listen well. I tried to nod and smile, but I'm afraid that my smile looked more like a wince, and after a while my neck ached from all the nodding. "Good heavens, girl," Papa suddenly declared. "Is there something wrong with your head? And why do you keep grimacing at us?" Was I to smile or nod at his remark? I couldn't tell. "Speak up, Janie," Papa said. "Why aren't you talking?" "I'm supposed to listen well. That's what Miss Hepplewhite said." I looked over at William for help, but he was in the middle of a coughing fit. He had the napkin at his mouth and was making a gurgling noise. Papa roared with laughter so loud that the chandelier shook. "Janie," he said, "is this school I'm sending you to going to turn you into one of those useless women who care for nothing but dresses?" "I'm trying to be a proper young lady, Papa," I said in a small voice. Papa didn't understand anything. "A worthy goal," William said, nodding his head approvingly. Papa's eyes narrowed slightly. So Papa doesn't like what he sees. He's always telling Janie to speak up. She's saying nothing. But William, does William like it that she's being quiet? Yes, he said, "Oh, that's a good goal, right?" "You'll be a lady in no time at all," William added. "All that is required is dedication and single-mindedness." "Do you truly think so?" I asked shyly. "Why, yes, I do," he said, ignoring Papa's loud snort of disdain. A reluctant smile tugged at William's lips. When he smiled like that, I had a warm feeling in my belly, nearly the same feeling I had after eating Mrs. Parker's cherry pie. I grinned at Papa. Since you mentioned it, Papa, I do need new dresses. Miss Hepplewhite says mine are most unsuitable because of all the cherry stains. Papa sighed heavily and sank back into his chair. There was so much to learn at the Young Ladies' Academy, and Miss Hepplewhite considered me a challenge. Raw clay, that's what you are, my dear, she said, not unkindly. But we will mold you yet. Miss Hepplewhite demonstrated with a footstool how to enter and descend a carriage properly, which didn't involve leaping as Jebediah and I usually did. Like so, she said, holding up her petticoats carefully and arching one tiny foot. She showed me how to stand gracefully, how to walk, and how to sit. I was amazed to discover that I had been standing, walking, and sitting the wrong way all these years. Really, I didn't know anything at all. A young lady, Miss Hepplewhite emphasized, gazing at me, should never skip or jump or scream. It looks like all of us girls are not proper young ladies in 1850. I love running. My hand crept up timidly. What about running? Miss Hepplewhite looked pained. Miss Peck, she said at last, a young lady should never, ever, under any circumstances whatsoever, run. Should you find yourself in a situation where you are at risk, it is always preferable to faint. Do you understand me? The other girls giggled. Yes, Miss Hepplewhite, I whispered. I knew better than to ask about spitting or lobbing manure. So someone's gonna attack you. Don't run. That would be improper. Just faint. Okay. How I learned. Each day I reported back to William on my successes at Miss Hepplewhite's. He alone seemed to appreciate my diligent study. Today we learned about Chapter 7, or Deportment at the Dinner Table. I learned that a young lady should speak in low tones, never loud, or never laugh out loud, yawn, or blow her nose at the table, I informed him. Or spit, I added, remembering. William was sitting at the desk in his bedroom with maps spread out in front of him. Really? He asked in a distracted voice. No spitting? No belching either. Papa's going to be upset about that one. William said, his attention fixed firmly on the maps before him. What are those? I asked, scrambling around the desk, trying to get a closer look. He regarded me with serious eyes. Those, Mrs. Peck, are maps of the frontier. Where the Indians lived? I gasped. There were always thrilling stories about Indians in the newspapers, how they abducted women and ate babies and did all sorts of horrible things to the poor pioneers. So at that time, newspapers were not accurate. Newspapers would report things that were just rumor, and they were very unkind to Native Americans in the way they would share stories. Not everything was always true. Jebediah always said that he would like to meet some Indians one day, as long as they didn't cut off his scalp. William nodded. Yes, there may be savages there. You see, Jane, when I'm finished with my apprenticeship with your father, I'm going out there and make my fortune. Are you going to dig up gold in California? Jebediah had told me all about his plans to go to California and dig up the gold in the ground. Jebediah had lots of big plans. I heard all about them as I practiced listening well. Not California, Jane. Every fool from Boston to the Carolinas is rushing out to dig up California. Not I. I'm not going to spend my life digging in a pit. I'm going where there's land to be had. Where is that? He pointed to a spot on the top left-hand corner of the map. Oregon country, he said, his eyes glowing. Why don't you get land here in Philadelphia? William laughed grimly. I am the youngest son of 5 boys. There is no money left for me. Why not? If I'd been born first, my father's printing business would be mine, but I had the bad luck to be born last. Papa says you make your own luck, I said. William made a dismissive sound. Your father has many peculiar ideas. You cannot change luck. Nothing will alter the fact that my eldest brother is heir to everything. His voice softened, and I am the heir to nothing. That's not fair. No, he murmured, it isn't. I wanted to say that I would give him anything to take that sad look off his face, but I remained silent. He seemed to gather himself, which is why I must work twice as hard and be very clever. It is only through my own cleverness and determination that I shall succeed, he said in a firm voice. Like me, I said. I have to work hard too. Why, I haven't thrown manure in over 2 months. But William appeared not to be listening to me. I will have my experience as a surgeon to support me as I try to obtain land. And there is land to be had, Jane. What good is land? Land, he said, slapping the map, is the key to a man's fortune. I could go too, I said eagerly. I could help you. What would you do? He asked, raising a smooth eyebrow. I could learn how to bake Mrs. Parker's cherry pie. Perhaps you could, Jane, he said with a slight smile. Perhaps you could. All right, so we are going to pause there. I am at the end of page 27, and I will see you next time.